What's up, investors? Chase here from the Note MBA podcast. On this week's episode, we have an interview with Brecht Palombo from Distressed Pro. We talk about his history. We talk about his .com busts, about him just holding paper, holding all kinds of pets.com paper. Well, I don't know if it's technically pets.com, but he had a lot of that .com bust paper, which is unfortunate, and how that prepared him for what happened in the housing market, what and why that is the reason for something like Distressed Pro to exist, what Distressed Pro is, and how he's seeing the market, what the market looks like now, and what he's seeing in the future, as he is just a giant data and numbers nerd and geek, which is fantastic. Him and Robby nerd out for a minute or two. Anyway, that's what we talk about on this week's show. Check it out right now.
And determine what my commission rate is and all that. I also had an uncle who was making like $700,000 a year, something like that. And I was like, holy, that's fantastic.
While you were busy holding empty paper for pets.com, you had a
first, seconds, performing, non-performing? What the f***? Note buyers, when it seems like you're in this business alone, know Chase, Robert, and the rest of their tribe are at it every week. They're bringing updates from their own note businesses as they work to find, fund, and finish deals. Follow along as they share their grassroots education with you, tuition free. If you'd like to know more about what they do and to download the entire back catalog, check out notemba.com. Now, here are your hosts, Chase Thompson and Robert Woods.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Note MBA podcast, your home for note investing on iTunes. I am Chase Thompson, joined as always by Robert Woods, who is technically driving just a state away. Isn't that right, Robby? You're in New Orleans, correct?
I am, sir. Actually just parked, so I am good to go in the Big Easy right now.
The last time you did essentially a phone-in, though not in the sense of saying you're phoning in an episode, but the phone-in call was you going like 74 miles an hour down some highway between Vegas and Los Angeles or something like that. So.
Yeah, I was going through the Cajon Pass on the way to Las Vegas.
I love it. So this week we talked a little bit about it on last week's episode, very, very briefly, a little bit of foreshadowing from Mr. Woods. But on this week's show, we have a fantastic interview with Breck Palumbo from Distressed Pro. I feel like, so welcome to the show, Breck. Most people, we have like this long, drawn out intro, but for you, I feel like everyone just kind of knows you guys in the space.
Is that true? Wow, that's great. If that's true, I wish more of them would sign up.
So for those that don't know, for all two of you that are listening that don't know what Distressed, it's an online software that helps you find and evaluate, REOs, non-performing loans, bank contact data. It's a crazy, crazy resource for being able to find all of the data that's kind of, or not all, I guess, right? Like, I know that I think it's either on your website or over on LinkedIn or something like that. It said like 97.3% or something like that. All, right, of the data.
Yeah, that actually, I should find out where you saw that and update that, because the truth is today we're at 100% of all. We track every bank and credit union, all of their non-performing portfolios, including each type of non-performing loan and REO, and then we have contacts around that and training on how to use the data to find deals and all that. So I'm gonna have to root out that 97% number you just mentioned. Go fix that out there on the web somewhere. So yeah, it is 100%. So.
If it would be helpful for you to have it, if I did find it over on LinkedIn, so that would be like the place to go. If it would be helpful,
I'll go there and fix it for sure.
So you have essentially all at this point, all of that data that kind of has come through. Very, very cool. Mm-hmm. Before we dive in too heavily on that, though, we kind of talked briefly about some of the stuff we wanted to cover on the show. I would love to know your history, love to know your background. Last time we spoke, it was somewhere around, when did you get into the business? Essentially real estate, somewhere around 2000, 2002, something like that. But when did you start kind of really diving in on this industry, and where did you get your feet wet first when it comes to real estate investing and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. I was sort of a .com refugee from the first go around. And when I came out of that, and I had shares upon shares, like hundreds of thousands of shares in .com companies that did absolutely nothing. And then just kind of got downsized or whatever when everything I'm not sure if this is an explicit show or whatever, and everything crapped the bed. We'll just say that. It's a nice way to say that.
You're going to say shit the bed, weren't you?
Yeah, I was going to say shit the bed.
I got you.
So when that happened, I said, well, I don't ever want to have that happen again, because I had just busted my ass for years, like early mornings, late nights. And in the end, it was just a paycheck. There was no equity. There was no, none of that. And, just kind of just got shot out the other end. So after that happened, I said, well, I can sell things, and that's what I need to be doing. Well, how would I insulate myself from this sort of an event again? And I looked around and I said, well, real estate's like the one thing it's always, it's always there. There's always value in it. You can find unlimited buyers and sellers of it. And so it's really a place where I could make my own way without having to rely on, a company to give me a product to go and sell and determine what my commission rate is and all that. I also had an uncle who was making like $700,000 a year or something like that. And I was like, holy, that's fantastic.
While you were busy holding empty paper for pets.com, you had a crazy uncle making a ton of capital. So you're like, oh man, I gotta go look at that. Exactly. That looks pretty hot.
Yes. And you can't get fired and all that. So that was in 2001. It was right after 9/11. So it took me a little while in the beginning. I started real low on the totem pole, even with like a lot of sales background. I started doing rentals on Newbury Street in Boston, which is, if anyone's been to Boston, that's like the high end street. And so it was like, a few months of just like turning keys and signing leases or whatever. And then I decided, well, that's not really where the money is at. I'm going to go start selling stuff. And I did that. And I kind of did like the standard realtor thing for maybe about a year, and then realized that I don't care about your school system. I don't care what color the bathroom is, or like where Jimmy's gonna, go play, or any of that. Like, I don't give a crap. What I do care about in the business is the money, right? Like, how do you make money in real estate and all the investment and all that? So I very quickly discovered that I should not be working with homeowners, buyers and sellers, and that I should be working with investors and developers. And I did that pretty successfully for a number of years. And I had a partner who came on, and I kind of got the leads in and did a lot of the math, and he did a lot of the hand holding and the showing of properties and all that. And we did great. And then it was late 2006, and I was doing a deal on this. Basically what we would do is we'd go find off-market properties. So we'd go find like multifamilies and warehouses and stuff like that our developers would come in, buy, convert into condos or something else. We'd cut them up, do the paperwork, and then we'd resell them. So it was really kind of a nice relationship, because we didn't have to work with very many folks to do a lot of transactions, We had this one deal where I found this nursing home and it was not a huge deal. It was a little over $500,000 for the thing, and then it was going to be like another $300,000 in renovations. And I had two guys in my developer stable who both were able to do this deal. One of them had never done a deal before. He was just getting into it, and then this other guy had like one or two under his belt, and they were both able to do this deal with 100% financing on the thing, for all of it, for the construction money and for the acquisition and for everything. And I just thought, this is insane. Like the credit market is insane right now. This doesn't make any sense. Something's going to happen here. And so I decided that I wanted to get positioned for when that happened. And I said, well, supposing, the market shits the bed or we go the other way, what am I going to do? And I decided it was going to work for the banks, because if, when you have a crisis, when asset prices come down, the people who hold the debt are in the best position. If you're that little slice of equity way up on top of a stack of debt, you're nowhere. And so when things go the wrong way, like the debt position is really where it's at. So that's the banks. They're the ones making all the loans. I know they're going to be the ones calling the shots on the way down. And so I started getting positioned for that. Then I got an auctioneer's license and started calling on banks. Turned out I had no idea what I was doing at all. And
it sounds like you're really surprised that you had no idea what you were doing. You're like, turns out, I had no idea what I was doing. And which I love.
Yeah. Well, I had, I figured I had this sort of background in, I had done a lot of, I sold to Fortune 1000 companies. I'd sold to government organizations. Like I had like a pretty good sales background. So I figured, this was just another one of those. And then it just wasn't, it just didn't work the same way. And I didn't get it. And so I ended up hooking up with, I had my own brokerage at this point. In fact, I started a commercial real estate brokerage in early 2007, which is about the worst possible timing for anyone ever to start a commercial real estate brokerage. And through that, I was gonna go, work for the banks. Now, this is still pretty peaky at the time, like really frothy, peaky. There's not like a lot of distress. But anyway, I decided I was going to get hooked up with somebody who did know what they were doing, and so I maintained my brokerage. But I started working through this other kind of mentor guy who had a book of business, and started learning from him. And that's when I really started getting traction. Was after that when they had a little, I'm going to call it a training program. It was a 3-ring binder with a couple of pages, that had been like probably photocopied or whatever. They kind of gave me some clues into what, how the whole thing works. And then I started to crack it. And figure it out. And so that's kind of the story. Everybody knows what happens after that is that we do have a real estate crisis and we do have a credit crunch. And then after that happened, things obviously really started picking up. And in 2009, I was doing a decent book of business, and I said, I started kind of digging into the numbers more. I was talking to more people and understanding more about how things worked. And I said, well, I can't be the only one who's having this, problem. I'm a CCIM in the CCIM organization, a bunch of different organizations, and everybody who's in the business, I'm hearing they're all struggling. I was like, well, more people have got to be wanting to work with the banks because that's the only game in town right now. This is early 2009. And I was right. So I started going out and learning more about that. And I put together sort of my first really, really crappy, terrible product around this, which was basically like a giant PDF that you could download with all the bank data in it in 2009. And people,
how large was that?
That's like 700 pages.
Golly, that sounds like what you would imagine the MLS looked like before the MLS was like whenever old real estate agents talk about it coming out in like a binder or like a book, and you're just like, oh, that sounds awful. That was essentially what the first version of like what was to become Distress Pro was like this giant 700-page PDF.
I resemble that comment because the first MLS I ever had was you had an option to do like this DOS kind of a thing, but otherwise it was a book that showed up, periodically or whatever. So I've been in business that long. So yeah, that's what I sold. And then I said, well, people are buying that. It makes sense. I should go and create the software, even though I don't have any idea how to write software. And I hired people to do that. And that started going okay. But what I found out was that nobody knew what they were doing. Well, which shouldn't have been a surprise because I didn't have any idea what I was doing at the beginning either. So I started selling this data and people were like, what the hell does this mean? And so then I started building out sort of training around it and got kind of noticed by some folks, including like bankers and regulators and folks like that. And so I started talking to them and kind of really got much deeper into it until, now we're fast forward years later, 8 years later, whatever it is. And now we've got like a really pretty complete solution. So that was a really long way for me to tell that story. I'm sorry that took so long.
It's all good. I mean, that's what people are here for, right? They're here for the stories. They're here for the information news. And it's interesting that you kind of have come through what could have been essentially, right, two fallouts, right? Two market fallouts. The obviously anybody that's listening to this show either went through or had some sort of stake in, or at least just watched from the outside, obviously the .com situation. Yeah. I'd say most everybody listening to this either there's no way you missed, obviously the real estate fallout. You were either like one of the few on the other side, kind of like what you saw coming due to what you kind of went through, or you were sitting there, right, holding the bag in a lot of situations. So, it's, how much of that already weathering that storm caught your eye to kind of see what was happening in the real estate, right? Because you said you saw these guys just getting unbelievable credit, unbelievable, offers and what have you. And you're like, wait. I've seen this before. I'm going the other way. Whereas everybody else, right, like except for a handful, right, was like, oh crap, I can go get $1 million to it, whatever percent, right? Is it the experience? Is that literally all that was like, wait a minute? Or was there something else? Or you're just generally kind of a smarter dude than 99% of people that got, I mean, is that what it was though? Is just seeing it before, kind of writing on the wall?
Yeah. I don't think I'm generally smarter. I think I liked, I'm a little crazy about the data. Like I like to really keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on all the time. I've always been that way, and just it helps me kind of understand the bigger picture to get down to sort of some of the brass tacks, like the more raw information out there. The raw data, which I'll share a little bit of what I'm seeing now with you when we get to that. But I think it had a lot to do with that, but it had a lot to do with just like getting tired of getting beat up and not wanting to go through. I mean, I was, how old was I? I don't remember how old I was. 20. I don't remember. Anyway, moved back in with my mother, after the .com thing. That sucks. Nobody wants to move back in with their mother. You know what I mean? So if I could avoid that, I don't know. I like to evaluate what was going on. And I'm not going to say that I didn't get hurt in the real estate crash, because I did. Like I ate shit really, really hard in 2008, even though I already had momentum behind me, and even though I was already going in the right direction and all that, I did 10% in 2008 of what I did in 2007, and I didn't work any less. I didn't have any. I mean, it barely covered all the insurances that I needed to have, and so, I mean, I ate it really, really hard. And on top of that, I had so I wasn't too smart. I had a condo project of my own that I had gotten into, and so I had too much debt on that. And I had, I had every problem that anybody you've interviewed who had problems in 2008 in real estate. I had all those friggin' problems, regardless of the fact that I saw it coming. So don't hold me in too high of regard.
Listen, it's a course correction. You were course correcting sooner than most, I'd say. But isn't that kind of? I'm not super familiar with it off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that's part of the hero's journey, the moving back in with your mom, right? Joseph Campbell clearly wrote about that part in this, 24 arcs of a hero's journey, whatever. Definitely the move back in with your mom is definitely an arc in that piece. As somebody, and Robby, obviously jump in anytime you want, but as somebody who isn't traditionally, not necessarily not a numbers guy or not an engineering type guy, I appreciate it. I love it, but I don't geek out, right? In the same way that a lot of you guys have. We've interviewed some of those guys on the show, and I love being able to sit down and really dive in on that.
Well, the numbers are where it's at, man. It makes it easy for us to do that hard math stuff, and then it gives you a real easy answer. You take all the emotion out of it when you get the number stuff sorted in there.
Right.
Totally. What is it that you're seeing? I mean, you are the guy, right, to be asking. I mean, you're pulling in all of this data. You're seeing it every day. What can you tell us? No crystal balls or anything, but what can you tell us?
Yeah, sure. No crystal balls, but if we're just talking straight numbers, right? I mean, I think that people are starting to hear a little bit about cracks in multifamily, for example, which has been like white hot for a long time. And the fact is that newly defaulted multifamily notes have been on the rise since last June, which that's kind of where they bottomed out, was last June. And so let me just do some quick math on what this equals. But I think, we're talking about like a 25 or 30% increase in newly defaulted multifamily loans from June through the most recent reporting period. Now we're in a reporting or we're coming up on a reporting month right now, because banks report every quarter, and then so do credit unions. Then they make amendments throughout the quarter, but the last fully closed out quarter was, during this conversation, was Q4 2016, right? And then all the data comes in by the end of January, actually February 5th. And so what we're seeing there is that it's almost 30% greater. It's like 28% greater than June. And so it's just stepping up. And then if we go and we look at some of the other information about this, we can see that also at the end of the year, we had a little spike in newly late residential loans, and in farmland loans, and in commercial and industrial loans, which is commercial loans not backed by real estate. Consumer credit cards also like ratcheting up in a pretty significant way, and has been for over a year. And so, we've got all of this debt out there, some of it pretty cheap. And for a long time, I think that that the credit availability was really only for a pretty select set, but it's been pushed really hard on us as a society to kind of get things going again by having us take up all this debt to go out and consume. And you can only do that for so long. Like if you take a look at what's happening with credit cards and with auto loans and school loans, like we're awash in it, right? And so that all of that debt needs service, like all of it needs service, and only some of it is backed up by any assets. So it's hard to see a way that we come out of this inflation without some serious correction. Like I don't see any way that happens. If you look at what's happening in retail right now, which also got pretty hot there, inexplicably hot, because it wasn't like people are spending, crazy amounts of money, except at Amazon. And now that's coming home to roost. And we're looking at folks who are talking about, now you and I can't do this because we don't have enough money, but hedge funds and whatnot starting to short a lot of the CMBS backed stuff via CMBX on retail and commercial and other stuff like that. So I don't see any way that we don't have correction. Like there is no endless debt cycle that has ever happened in the history of debt on the planet, right? So it always gets paid. So I think to be working with the banks, to be the owner of the debt now is a much better place to be than to be in the skinny little slice of equity atop a mountain of debt. That makes sense?
It makes a ton of sense. I mean, it's the namesake of the show, right? Note MBA. No, right. But it makes a ton of sense. I guess listening to that, is it as bleak as it sounds? In the general sense, because obviously we love to focus on the real estate side of it, whether that be the residential or commercial side. But there is all of these other components that are going to affect people's ability to pay, right, on the residential, the commercial, whether that's a note we own or somebody else, right, whether that's whatever the case may be. So you have to look at all of those numbers. You have to look at all of those things. And so when you bring all of that data to the fore, it doesn't look great, in the general sense, unless of course you're already working with the banks and you're able to start really picking up some stuff. But aside from that, I mean, I love that you it seems as though you come at this from that very scientist type mentality, right? Where you kind of hedge. You're constantly kind of like hedging kind of the way you'll say a thing or do a thing. It sounds really bad. And it looks even worse. It sounds like if you look at that raw data you're talking about.
I didn't want to do that. Look, I don't. I don't see. It's a problem with being an auctioneer, right? Is I'm a perma bear.
Yeah, right. You're just constantly just a sad sack, and you're just going to bring us off. Yeah, but looking at it that way, I mean, all the data, like Robby mentioned, right? The numbers are the numbers. It helps keep that emotion out of it. No question. Data is super important. No question. But all that data without context is nothing, right? Like it's just numbers, right? So you providing some of that context and saying, here's where things are and here's where things are going to be, is helpful. And looking at it from the investors we have that listen to the show, both passive and active, it seems like what we do is going to see similar opportunities, what we saw just a couple of years ago in terms of picking up those deals.
It's hard to see a way that mortgage rates aren't really going to go down, right? Are they? Can they even? Now we're talking about possibly 3 hikes over the projection is we're going to have 3 hikes, rate hikes by the Fed over the course of this year. The asset prices are definitely driven by debt today. Like there's no other way around that. So if the debt contracts, then ergo. The asset prices do. And so I'm not an economist, thank goodness. And I don't want to sound, it's not necessarily doom and gloom. The biggest fortunes that have been made in down cycles. I mean, you can't, if you're getting in at the top, it's very, very hard to get rich getting in at the top, right? I mean, that's just the way that it is. So you're making this hard for me, Chase. Now you make me feel like I just came in and rained on everybody's parade.
I know, you're just going to come down.
Well, hold on. Can I, let me interject real quick. Let me get off of mute for a second. Yeah. I'm rolling around the fairgrounds. I just passed where Jazz Fest happens, which is happy. Bring a little smile, some sunshine. I think the biggest thing to take back in context is what people learned during the last downturn. Right. Stop buying for appreciation. If you can't cash flow your investment, what are you doing? And if you don't have the nut on the back end to cover your negative cash flow, you shouldn't be in the deal. So looking at what we're doing, I talk to a lot of people about how are we evaluating our residential non-performing notes through the exit strategies of knowing if you end up with this property, you better be able to turn a profit out of it because that's going to be your worst case, most expensive scenario. But if you're modeling this stuff off of contracting values, dude, you don't know where those are going to go. But I don't know if we looked at the percentage in the United States, almost no market saw a huge, heavy retraction in rental rates. So when you're looking at it from that comparison relative to what people should be paying in the market, whether you're going to put the credit out there as a seller's finance, these people coming back through and defaulting on all their debt, I mean, that doesn't sound like a bad thing to us. That's like one of the best things that could be going on because we've seen the downturn. We got smacked. You get your hand caught in the cookie jar. You put your hand on the hot oven. You should have learned your lesson to be prepared for it and be in cash when this comes back around next time, or able to re-leverage out of whatever you're at if you're in a full equity position right now, not leveraged. So I think it's actually the doom and gloom is one of the best things we can hear if you plan on staying in the debt business.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I agree with what you said when you started that, which was sort of that. It's the speculation that's the problem, right? When you're speculating on appreciation, that's when you end up with a problem. When you're buying on cash flow, that's a whole other thing. And so, a big part of the problem that we've had in the markets has been that the strike prices, the stuff it's trading at speculative prices, right? Where people are trading because they're expecting that it's going to be worth more in the future. And so as long as you're not doing that, but when we look at things like the commercial market right now, the cap rates out there, right? It's the lowest cap rate. People would know what a cap rate is on this show, probably.
Yes.
They should, but we'll give them a high level just to explain whatever your NOI, your net operating income is, divided by the cap rate, which is a function percentage, will give you your value or what the market value of that property.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's almost like getting an interest rate on a thing if you did the math that way. And so they're compressed more than they've ever been. And that doesn't make any sense. And the reason is because all this money is seeking yield, right? Because it has to get it somewhere, because it can't get it through sort of some safer, more traditional ways of investing, like, large investment. So I think as long as you've bought with like good fundamentals, like you always should, regardless of what's happening in the market, then you're going to be great. And if you're in the note business, even better, because it's going to provide a lot more opportunity, I think, to a lot of folks who've been looking for a way to get in for a while. There's a lot of cash on the sidelines.
Yeah. And I guess not looking at necessarily, obviously the doom and gloom was the path, but we actually shared we do a weekly email. If you guys aren't subscribed, go check it out over at notamba.com. But we actually shared 2 articles today in the email. One talking about how there was a 5.8% uptick in mortgage applications right over the past, I think, month or something like that. And then they had HELOCs, and that was MSN Money, I think, was reporting that. And then over on Housing Wire, they were talking about how Moody's was reporting that there's been a 21% uptick in HELOCs. Like, they're finally coming back. This kind of seconds boom is being generated by consumers. They're just hammering, I guess, on the banks to make them happen. And then, so I look at the consumer side, right? Kind of what we shared today in today's email and talking a little bit about that. And then, of course, I have the privilege of getting to talk with you. And then I get to see like that back end industry side. And to me, it was just the juxtaposition between those two is so fascinating to me. To see you mention it in such a way, and then it's like, oh, well, this is kind of interesting over here as well. So it's more that I'm looking at. It was really fascinating, right? And I do have a quick question kind of regarding what we shared in today's email, and then, of course, what you've been talking about. Do you have some sort of email, something that goes out, a way that people, I mean, as you're constantly looking at this data and stuff like that, that they can keep up and be aside from, obviously, we can talk and dive into Distress Pro, right? But like in general, just a way for people to kind of keep up with some of the things you're looking at. Do you have like a Twitter? Do you share that stuff in different places?
Yeah, I think, the best thing to do is if you go to distressedpro.com/mini, MINI, so Distressed Pro, DISTRESSEDPRO.com/mini, MINI. And when you get there, I have like a sort of like a little introductory free course, and I show you where you can get all of this information for free, and how to, how I look at it, and different things like that, and sort of walk you through how to process it and all that. And so go there, sign up there, and then whenever we put out any new information, you'll get it via email after that.
Very cool. And of course, those links, as always, will be in the show notes over at notamba.com. You guys can go check that out. So I guess looking at the program, looking at what you guys have, like I said, we have a decent amount of people that do what we do, that are colleagues of ours, people that we interact with all the time, that use Distress Pro BankProspector to kind of take a look at all of this data that's coming through, and being able to use that, engage that as a means for executing on different strategies within their business, right? Calling on a bank, or looking at different ways to add to whatever their deal flow might be and what have you. For you, aside from what sounds to be like a usability increase in a 1,000-fold, moving from the 700-page PDF to then the online application that is Distress Pro and BankProspector. You had mentioned that you guys are kind of like doing some really cool soft launch stuff that y'all have going on. This is all really awesome stuff. Are you continuing to put money into this because it just seems so great already? Like, everyone I know that talks about it, they're just like, it's crazy robust. Like, you've got to get in there and like,
that's really nice.
Yeah. They talk about like the thing that they have to do first is just, it's almost like being dropped off in the forest in the middle of nowhere, right? You just get your bearings, right? Pull out the compass, take a look at what you got. I know you guys have some trainings and stuff. What can they expect inside that software?
Yeah. So we've really tried to get on top of that, in terms that you said, like dropped off in the forest and all that. And so what we're really trying to do over the last, 6 or 9 months or so is correct that. And so one of the things that we've put out recently is like now whenever you sign up, no matter what it is, whether you sign up for the Academy, which is where we really get into sort of the nitty gritty, or you're just getting just the software, we have this Mastering Bank Prospector course that goes along with it. And it's about, I don't know, 20 videos or so. And it walks you through every single thing that happens in there. So, you know, like, okay, I'm looking at this number and it's red. Like, why do I care about this? Well, you know, we want you to understand that. And so what we don't want to do is drop you off inside a bunch of numbers and just horrify you. I think in order to sort of, without going in here and looking at it, in order to explain what's in there, the first thing I should explain is probably the approach. And the approach is a top-down approach. And so what I found out early on is that the bottom-up approach to note investing, to going and buying non-performing. Now I'm talking about non-performing, right? And there's a whole other business of going to private sellers for performing notes and all that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is like going to lenders for non-performing assets. And so there are a lot of folks out there who talk about going from the asset level up, right? So you find somebody who's in default, and then you get them, you want them to put you in touch with their bank, and then you're going to, you know, supposedly you're off to the races or whatever. And what I've found is that that's kind of bullshit. Like not to rain on anyone else's parade about this, but I don't know anyone who's been successful with that. Now, that isn't to say that I don't know anyone who's ever done any deals like that, but there's a few challenges with it. One is like, so the person got, you know, a mortgage with New Century, and then it got bought by, you know, Chase, and then it, you know, so now it's being serviced by, so who are you, what are the chances that you're going to get in touch, going in that direction, that you're going to get in touch with somebody who's going to be able to make a decision to sell you an individual non-performing residential note, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. I think
you're more likely to get in contact with someone who can't even authorize that. Like, you know what I mean? You're going at it at a level that you're just talking to the wrong guy. You know, we've used between ourselves and between different projects we've worked on, Robby and I have used an analogy basically where it's like you walk into Best Buy and you want to buy a TV and you walk into the mobile phone department. Like you're in the right store. They just can't help you. They're going to be like, they're going to just go, well, I guess you could turn your iPhone sideways and it's kind of like a TV. Like it's not even it's not the right product. You're in the wrong section. Like there's not going to be able to help you at all.
Completely. And I mean, there's a whole list of problems with doing that approach. One is that you end up with the big banks, and the big banks, they're not going to talk to you about an individual residential mortgage like that. If they do, you're doing an excellent job. I don't know what you're doing. I'd love to have a conversation with you and find out. But I've interviewed dozens and dozens, like over 4 dozen people who've been in the business for a long time at high levels, and everybody agrees that doesn't work. And so what does work is when you are speaking with the actual decision maker, and then instead of going, okay, I'm going to find a poor homeowner and then they're going to, introduce me to somebody, I'm going to call an 800 number and get a thing signed and, proof of funds and all this crap. Instead, if you cut out those top 10 banks, forget like U.S. Bank and Chase and Bank of America and all those, and you say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on local lenders here who have problems. They have, maybe they have 5 or 10 or even 20 offices, right? And so they don't send everything off to a big special servicer when things go wrong. They have sometimes they'll have someone from the line, someone who's actually writing the loans who's going to handle the workout. Sometimes they're going to have like these little in-house workout departments or special assets departments. And now we're talking, because if we go in and we speak at the decision maker level and we speak with them about the problems and the challenges that they're having, and then they send us a tape and we evaluate the tape and we come, now we're doing like real business with people. And it's a totally different approach to going in the other way, which just it just doesn't work. Patently doesn't work. So, so that's what we recommend, is that you start with local, community, and regional banks. You go up as high as you can within the organization. They will direct you to the people who you need to be working with. When you show up at the people with whom you should be working, you're going to say, hey, I was just talking to your boss or your boss's boss. They say that you're the person in charge of this. And here's the kind of problem that we solve for an organization like yours, is you have these non-performing loans on your books, and we get them gone for you. Now, whatever, your pitch is going to be. And now you can have like a real conversation about how, and you're with somebody who can actually make a decision, and you can actually do deals. So that's sort of the baseline understanding before we could even talk about the software, about how to approach the whole thing. Does that make sense?
That's the playing chess instead of checkers version of getting in front of asset manager.
Yeah. So that's first and foremost. So when we talk about how the software works in relation to that, is that there are a lot of different factors that point to whether or not a lender is a good seller, right? We'd want to know things like, do they have the types of assets that we're after? And are they an organization that sells from time to time? And if they do sell, are they even in a financial position where they can sell at a discount? Because we know that's what we're looking for. Or are they in a place where, where maybe things are too tight? And is there a certain time of the year that that they sell? Do they sell every fourth quarter, every second quarter, and all that kind of thing? And so once you get into BankProspector, those are the kinds of things that we want to kind of open up to you, so that you can say, all right, well, I'm looking for banks that have non-performing junior liens, and I'm going to be looking for local, community, and regional banks in whatever it's going to be, New England or the tri-state area, because we know that most of the time lenders this size tend to lend where they're located, right? You're not getting loans in California from a bank with 5 offices in Massachusetts. That's not how it works. So we know that they're going to have stuff in our area, and then from there we can really begin to prospect properly, and that's all the information that we give you in there. So all of the important health and financial data that you would need to know about a bank, and then we have in-house contacts. So we have thousands of contacts, and we add to it every single week. And our goal is to get you as quickly as possible to a proper list of prospects, the right list that you should be pursuing, and then to get you the right names, emails, and phone numbers so that you can immediately start making contact. Because what happens is, or at least for me, what happened is in the beginning, a lot of time with analysis paralysis and research and this kind of thing. There's 12,000 institutions, and that's not 12,000 locations, but 12,000 headquarters, right? So you have tens and tens of thousands of different banks and credit unions that you could call. There's probably only 200 that you should be calling, and then there's probably 10 that you're going to do business with, something like that. And so what we try to do is help you very quickly identify who those 10 are.
Yeah, I was going to say, essentially what you've got there, and I guess I appreciate, right, you setting the stage and saying we're going to be training and bringing all of the kind of stuff to help from that, as an ex-Boy Scout. That's why I use the dropped off in the woods. I don't think anyone's ever actually said that to me. So I just want to give you that as a quick point of interest, since apparently I've been the one beating up on you this entire time.
No.
But, it sounds to me like what's so great and so daunting is it's people, we've been implementing Salesforce. It's people that implement Infusionsoft when it comes to their contact management. I mean, you just end up with a great tool to do what you need to get done. You just have to figure out how to properly adjust it for your business, streamline it for your business, make it work and operate the way that you need for what it is that you do, right? Like you said, there's 2,000 banks out there to possibly call. You should probably be calling 20 or whatever. Here's how we help you nail down the 20. And then you can spend the rest of your time in your business then working on, say, the marketing or calling your servicers or working with other, those types of things, right? So it helps to say, streamline the call outs or the, that outreach component of it? Is that kind of where that really is? And if it is, if I'm in the system, obviously we know different people have different levels of implementation. How do I know I'm not calling on the same people everybody else is? Or what? How does that look? What does that look like?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the first thing I'll say is I've already heard your partner there mention or was it you mentioned the 80-20, right? Yeah. And the fact is that if I signed up, 10,000 people on this, there's not going to be 10,000 people calling banks. You know what I mean? There's sure. There's like a certain number of people who they're not going to do the work, sadly for them. And that happens for sure. The other thing that I'd say about that is that we're providing the entire universe of U.S. banks and credit unions. So there are no other banks and credit unions that like other people are calling on. This is all of them, like every one of them. Right. So if just because we make it easier for you to do doesn't necessarily, what I'm trying to say is there's not more competition because you're using the same system. This is the same world of banks either way. It's just a matter of whether or not you're going to have the information that you need in order to go about this, right?
Essentially, same pond, better fishing, right? Better fishing instruction, right? Like go over here in this cove. That's where you're actually going to catch. Everyone's still in the same pond, right? Essentially. Right. And I will say we've had on the show, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but you might have met him. Paul Burkett of Automation Finance out on the West Coast. Or absolutely. No, he's actually on the East Coast. Yeah. He's up in New York. He has talked about essentially the same thing. He's like between y'all being Robby and myself, kind of popularizing, what it is that they do, and a few other kind of people that he's worked with kind of get his name out there. They went from selling off, they'd buy 1,000 deals and try to work them all. And then they might sell off a handful, like literally 4 to 5. And then, of course, through our show and other people's efforts and what have you, now they're, it's a larger part of their business by a long shot. And he said still, though, and this is me, we were up in New Jersey, and I was meeting with him. And he said still the case is, he probably increased his email list for sell-offs by, 1,000 people. It was crazy. Yeah. But he still only, he'll get, say, 100 bids off that now, 1,000 people. And then of that 100 bids, 20 of them are any good. So that's he went from selling 4 to 5 to now selling like 20, maybe 35, right? Like, which is still a pretty high increase in terms of multiplied over what he used to sell, but on a monthly basis. But at the same time, it's exactly what you're talking about. He added 1,000 people to his database, got essentially 70 more bids, but only sold 20 more deals because it just is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, the world of deals out there doesn't change just because I'm showing you where they are, and so what we try not to do, a lot of people want to say like, well, just give me the, just give me the hot list, give me the exact, ones that I should be calling. Well, I don't know which ones are the exact ones you should be calling because we don't know what's happening inside there. Like, we get a pretty good view of it, but until you actually make a call and you're having a conversation with somebody, you don't know what the real pressures are inside that business and what, what's driving the decisions that they're making. So I guess there's a lot of opportunity. It's almost $250 billion in non-performing assets out there at the banks and credit unions today. So the idea that,
my gosh, like that's largely commercial or non what's the word I'm looking for? Like, you're not backed by, is that, you're talking about like consumer, what do you mean? Quarter trillion. I would you want to talk about data. That is a large number.
Yeah. So just like rough numbers, right? So right now, $250 billion is 250 billion, right? Yeah. And so right now at just the banks, not counting the credit unions, if just banks, just 1 to 4 family residential is almost 110 billion, right? So like just some quick numbers. There's and this is one of the things that I find pretty striking, and anytime that I open up anytime I do like a webinar presentation or anything like that, I like to give a couple of these numbers that I'm going to give you now. So there's almost 110 billion in non-performing residential loans in REO. This is what I think is so striking about this. Is like right now, there's this is as the banks are reporting, $3,903,996,000 in residential REO. Right. So let me say that again. So it's just a shade under 4 billion. Right. So that means that as I'm looking, I can't share this chart with you because it's audio. There's 104 billion in non-performing notes, right? So there's 108, almost 110 total, right? 4 of that is REO. The rest is non-performing notes. So,
and these are just single. I mean, these are 1 to 40s. I mean, these are single family.
We're only talking about 1 to 4. We're not talking about multifamily or construction. We're not talking about commercial or any of that. This is just the residential. And so when you think about that, you think like that's pretty huge. Now let's consider that. And you hear about like REO drying up and all this, and I just have to call BS on that. I know that some banks will hold back, right? Because they're like, well, if we put it out, look, the market's appreciating. They're speculating like everybody else. If we hold this back for a little bit, then we can get a better exit when we do this. We just kind of drag our heels, But if you talk about shadow inventory, I mean, we're talking about 25, 27, what does that work out to? 27, 28 times the volume of non-performing residential loans to REO, right? That's a huge ratio. I mean, that's a huge backlog. And there's a lot of different reasons for it. But, sometimes I think we hear a lot of things like CNBC and different market information that's coming through, and they kind of they go over some highlights. So like, oh, foreclosures are up, or oh, foreclosures are down, and oh, the REO is at the lowest it's been, without really any context to the rest of that, what they're saying. Right. And I think once you get in there and you have a look at like what's happened over the last how long has it been, 9 years or whatever since the crisis, like,
which, by the way, can we just say, that seems so long. Like,
I know
I've had 3 kids since then. It's crazy to think it's been that long.
It is. I was watching a show the other day, and then I was, that actress is really attractive. And then I realized she was born after I graduated high school. I was like, holy shit, I'm old. What's happening?
Well, it seems like it's long and it's far enough away for everyone to have forgotten. Which is where we started with the consumer debt, the tuitions, all of those other things, and then of course, like you're saying, hundreds of billions of dollars in shadow and other. I mean, it's next level. It was so long ago, everybody just forgot or something. Yeah. And one of my favorite quotes, and I think I actually put it, I'm not sure if I put it into one of our emails, was, oh man, I don't want to misattribute it, but essentially it was, history might not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes, which I think is so fantastic. And it sounds to me like a bunch of people saying there's cracks here and there, they're saying this or saying that. And it seems this time to be, me in particular, it sounds like a lot of people that listen to the show are a little bit better positioned for exactly what you're talking about.
I think so. I think, a lot of folks in our generation, we've had kind of a lot of knocks around, along the way. We've had, more crises and, more, I think we have, and it's given us more reason to sort of look at things with a little different, perspective, be a little bit more wary, of things, because it's not always as it seems, and things don't always go up. And, a lot of things that maybe was, we took for granted or understood, coming up, then we get off into professional life, and then we realize, oh, that's actually, you have to protect yourself. Like it's not always going to go up and to the right. And so, one other number I just want to throw at you there is, as I'm looking at this, we've got, a little over 4,000 banks that have late stage non-performing residential loans, right? And it's only 2,500 of them have any REO. And so when you start to look at things like that, you wonder, like, what's going on? What's going on beneath the surface? How are all these? Why is this happening like this? And the truth is that it's not some conspiracy or one big thing going on. It's a lot of little. It's a lot of little things. And so what we try to do is help you get out there and get like the decision maker level perspective on how it's all going to work and where your slice of the pie is there.
Yeah. So like I said before, it sounds essentially like, fishing in the same pond, just with a better lure, right? Like, and a guide, like a local that might only have 3 teeth and is like sitting in the back of your boat. It's like, no, you got to go over here. Yeah. You know what you need to do? You need to change your header over on Distress Pro. We're the local with 3 teeth, in a beer can telling you where to go fish. But no, I mean, that's essentially what it is, right? It's the same pond, like you mentioned, just with a much more laser focused, the sniper approach, as opposed to the like what everybody else does, right? Like, not only is it a shotgun approach, but it's like shotgun with a blindfold and earmuffs and like, you know what I mean? And spun around in a circle and then, like that type of thing, essentially. Totally. And that's what I think I appreciate so much about the fact, again, where we started with all the data, the context is what makes it so important. And it's quintessentially, as someone who's a big marketer, right? Like, that's what I do for the show. That's what I do for the business that we have, is I specialize in the marketing side of it. And it's that component is also what people miss in the marketing side, is the context. Everyone focuses on the content and almost nobody focuses on the context. And I feel like that's the same thing when people talk about data and they just want to throw these numbers around. I appreciate that what y'all do is provide better context and actionable context to be able to take and actually do things within your business. I think it's tremendous.
I appreciate that. One of the things when I started this and that I've really been a stickler for maintaining is a really like a no BS approach. It's hard enough out there, right? Without people feeding you just falsities, that aren't going to, or like misdirection, that aren't going to get you where you're going. And so what I've really tried to do is have it be as straightforward and honest an approach as possible. A lot of people don't like it because what they want is they want to log in and get, a list of non-performing loans or something, right? And, the fact is that, like, if it were that easy, there wouldn't be any money in it, right? If it were so easy that you just kind of, you log in, you're clicking buttons and then like you're owning things and money's coming to you or whatever. First off, I wouldn't be selling to you. I'd just be clicking the buttons all day.
That's why I could never own a donut shop, because it's so easy. Right? I wouldn't give any donuts to anyone else. I would make them all, eat them all, and then have just the worst, physical form ever. That's why I could never own a donut shop. It's essentially the same reason.
Right. So, I mean, it's the most honest way of this particular approaching this particular end of the business, because this is the real facts about, like, this is how it goes. And so anyway, that's what we try to maintain. It's a no BS approach. So.
To me, this is the stuff that I really am intrigued to kind of learn about and look at and really have conversations on, mostly because, again, this isn't my, or at least it doesn't tend to be my best side, right? Like, best side of the business and best way to kind of understand and tackle it. That is not me as a core individual. So I really appreciate being able to get educated as often as possible on it, which is great. So I do appreciate you coming in and checking that out. And I'm sure everybody else will really dig going over there. So for everybody listening, head over to distresspro.com/mini, MINI, and pick up that course. I will be doing that after this. That was like a pre-show informational piece. Like, I didn't even know about that prior to the show. So I'm going to head over there and I'm going to download it. So I'll be on your list now. You're welcome. But hopefully everybody else will jump into. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Everything we've talked about will be in the show notes over at NoteMBA.com, which, by the way, quick parentheses, NoteMBA.com, as of this recording right now, if you're listening in the future, everything's fine and dandy. If you're listening to this live, the website is in slight shambles. We're upgrading and we're updating, and it's going to be a lot of fun and doing some cool things for you guys. But head over to notmba.com and find this episode, and you can get everything there at the show notes over there. And then, of course, head over to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, and subscribe. And as always, be sure to tell 5 other people you know that you have not already told about the Note MBA podcast. We'll catch you guys next week. Thanks again.
Thank you.